sometimes I wish that I could go back and just take one more look and soak it in, because I remember in those moments just being so desperate to get out, being so desperate for this to be over, because I'm sure, as many of you can relate, COVID was a jail sentence for a lot of us. You know, we're stuck in countries that we don't want to be in. We're without family, we're without friends, we're alone. We have no loved ones around us. We are struggling mentally and emotionally. So financially, I was fine. Spiritually, I was fine. Mentally and emotionally, I was not fine. I will say that what kept me together, and I swear to God, what kept me going, was my job. There's something that happens to me when I get on my client calls where it's like the whole rest of the world is shut out and I am just in this vortex with my client, and I channel my things, I do my modalities, etc., no matter what is going on in my life. And I think that I'm really grateful for that kind of gift, because being in the service industry means that obviously you can't let your life affect the way that you show up with your clients. Yes, life happens, but it can't be at the detriment to your paying clients and whatnot. So I will say I get this trait from my dad. My dad is really good at compartmentalizing. I'm really good at compartmentalizing. I could be having like an argument with my fiance and just be like, fuck this, 10 minutes later, got to get on this client call and give it an incredible client call and then get back to it. I don't think everybody can do it. I think that really is a learned gift. And some people, they compartmentalize in a bad way. I used to compartmentalize in a bad way in terms of shutting things out from a trauma response. Now I definitely compartmentalize in a healthy and productive way. It's very productive for me. I couldn't do my job and my life without it, that's for sure. Anyway, but I struggled like so much. I know that I was really vulnerable with you guys during that time as well, sharing the tears, sharing the ups and downs. And I just want to validate for any of you, and I know that I did it during that moment, during that, period of time as well. It was rough. It was rough. I actually got to a point, I remember I was sitting down having breakfast one morning, and I actually got to a point where I decided with my family that we could no longer say that we miss each other. We could no longer say it because the pain that it would cause me afterwards was incomprehensible. It wasn't productive. We got to a point where it was like, this isn't productive for me, and I have to protect myself and put a boundary in that we can no longer say this to each other, because otherwise my whole day is just me trying to bottle up my tears to get through the day. One of some other things that I remember in the beginning, it didn't seem scary yet. It was like, oh, let's go on for another month, right? We all just thought it was going to happen for like one more month and then it's going to be over. In summertime in London, it was fine. I've lived in London before on my gap year, and I hated it. Obviously London's also one of those cities where if you don't have any money, you're going to hate it even more. So when I lived there on my gap year and I had no money, I fucking hated it. Living there and having money, it was better. I still just don't enjoy it. I don't mind going back there for like a little trip, see friends, a little holiday, etc. But I definitely could not live there again. The gloominess and the lack of sunlight affects me way too much. I love some moody weather. You guys know I love the cold and I don't need summer all the time, but I cannot have gray days all the time. It just doesn't do it for me. And then I will also say, like, I don't know, for some reason, the city of London just isn't my place. That's okay. I don't need to have necessarily a reason for it, but it just isn't necessarily my place. I know some of you guys have shared with me, I bet if you looked up your astro geographical, whatever it's called, chart, London would be like not a good place for you. Interestingly, it doesn't actually show that, but whatever. It's just not the right vibe for me. That's okay. So as some of you guys would remember, what I would actually do that you loved and I loved as well is I would pretend to be in different countries on my Instagram story. And you guys knew this. I'd be like outside in my backyard and I would be having a day in Italy, and I had my red bikini on and I had gold hoops and I'd make prosciutto and melon and play music and I'd make mocktails. And I really worked hard at making a vibe for myself. And I share that a lot with you guys. If you scroll back down on my Instagram, you'll see it. I was sharing the things I did at home. I was sharing the tips and tricks. I was sharing whatever. So I made it as much of a vibe as I absolutely could. And it was definitely a survival mechanism. And looking back, I wish, and obviously in the moment, there was no way really most of us could, but I wish that I got to appreciate that year being alone more, because obviously now life is busy again. And it's like, God, the things I would do to have no social commitments, nowhere to be, nothing to do, no one hounding me. But like you guys know, the grass is always greener on the other side. It's easy to say that now looking back, way harder in it. So there was a couple other key moments. So I remember at one point, trigger warning for anyone that has struggled with suicide before. I remember at one point actually sitting on the sofa and fully understanding why people commit suicide. I realized I had this moment where I was in so much agony. I was actually considering going back to Australia. I was in so much agonizing mental and emotional pain. And my anxious attachment style was fucking ramping up like I'd never experienced before because nothing had triggered it to that point before. So I didn't know it needed to be healed. I didn't even know it was there. And this is why it's like relationship and different seasons of life can trigger different things that you didn't even know needed to be healed or didn't need to be healed because they weren't being poked at. But for a lot of us, we could not silence any of our shit during COVID. Everything was being poked at. And I was dating and whatnot during COVID. And boy, oh boy, was it being poked at. I mean, everyone's shit was getting poked at in COVID. It wasn't just mine. We were all having every wound that we didn't even know existed come up in COVID. Everyone was so desperate for love and attention. Everyone was honestly their worst selves during that period of time. Everyone was in rough spaces. Everyone was behaving in ways that they would never behave today, etc. Anyway, so I remember sitting on the sofa. It was like a Sunday afternoon. And I think I just spoken to my cousin or something on the phone. And I remember sitting there being like, wow, I actually understand why people commit suicide. And it wasn't that I was suicidal. It was that I felt like I could not escape my pain. The pain wasn't the emotion. It wasn't the anxiety or anything like that. The pain was this jail sentence that the governments or whatever you want to believe put us in, of no timeline, of no seeing other people, of you have to survive being alone. You can't go home. You can't get back into to the country. You can't go traveling. You can't go to restaurants. You can't go to a supermarket. You can't leave the house. Like there's all these, you can't. And I felt like I was in a jail sentence. I felt like I was a prisoner in my own brain. And I'd experienced this once before, but more so being a prisoner in my own body. And it was not to this extent. When I had my ski accident, which I'll go into in a little bit, I definitely felt that then.